Okay, well, we're going to get started this evening. I'm going to go ahead and open in prayer. And then I'm going to begin by reading you guys a bedtime story. So hopefully it doesn't put you to sleep. Does anybody like bedtime stories? It's an early bedtime story, okay? So let's open with prayer. God, I thank you for today, and I thank you just for your blessings in our lives. Lord, you are the giver of every good and perfect gift you say comes from the Father of lights, the Father above, and we are thankful for the good gifts you give to us and the blessings that you give to us. May we take those blessings and those things that you bless us with and pass those on to others. May you continue to teach us things that we need to know so that we can always be people that love well and encourage well. So bless this time that we have this evening together. We give you honor and glory and praise in Jesus' name. Amen. So yeah, if you notice that my voice sounds a little bit different, it's allergy season, so my voice sounds a little different tonight. It can go really deep if I need it to go deep, but just one of the blessings of the beautiful weather, right, is the pollen is out and the flowers are out and things are growing. So I apologize if it's a little more difficult to understand me tonight. So there was a book, the book that this class is based on is obviously called The Blessing, and there was another book written, and I'm not sure if any of you have heard of this book, and the book is called I Choose You. It's a book that was written by John Trent based on the book The Blessing, and if any of you guys have children or grandchildren, and you're looking for just a simple book, this is a really neat book with the blessing kind of throughout the entire children's book. So I thought I'd just read it to you tonight because it's another example of how we can use the blessing to bless those around us, all right? So Norbert the little elephant had a very sad look on his face as he slowly walked up the steps to his home. This had been the worst day of his life. "Mom, nothing's gone right since I left for school this morning," groaned Norbert. I don't know if my mic might be a little hot, Melissa. It's kind of feeding back a little bit, but... "Did you miss the roller coaster ride to school again?" his mother asked. "Well, I got to the coaster stop just in time, but everyone had already had someone to sit with, so I had to sit all by myself. And then at lunch, all the fifth graders decided they wanted to sit at the table by the window, and that meant the only place left was to sit with Heidi the hippo." "But Heidi's a nice girl," Norbert's mother said. "Yes, Mom, but she thinks she's my girlfriend. She was walking over to sit by me, and she tripped and fell in my mashed potatoes right in front of the fifth graders. Then, after school, I went out to play ball, and when they picked teams, there was one kid too many." "You?" said his mother quietly. "Yes, me. Nobody likes me. Nobody wants to pick me." And as he spoke, a big, big tear rolled down his trunk. "Norbert," his mother said in the softest, warmest voice, "if I could use my arms to hug only one child, guess which one I'd choose?" "That's easy," said Little Elephant. "You'd choose Puffy Panda. He's so soft. Everyone likes a hug. Everyone likes to hug him. And since Puffy is so big, everybody can hug him, all at the same time." "No," said Norbert's mom. "Guess again. If I could use my voice to cheer for only one child, guess which one I'd choose?" "That's easy too. You choose Ralph the Rhino. Everybody cheers for him because he's so brave. He even jumps off the high diving board." "No," said Mother with a smile. "Guess again. If I could give a You're Someone Special medal to only one child, guess which one I'd choose?" "Mom, you choose Florence the Flamingo. She deserves a medal because she's the only one who can do a triple loop when we all go ice skating." "No," said Mother. "Guess again. If I could help just one child realize what an exciting and wonderful future God has for him, guess which child I'd choose?" "Man, that's a no-brainer. You choose Cassie the caterpillar because she'll be a beautiful butterfly someday." "No," said Cassie the cat. "No, not Cassie the caterpillar. Guess again," Mother chuckled. "If I could use my arms to hug and my voice to cheer, if I could teach one child he's God's special gift, and if I could tell him what an exciting and wonderful future he has, especially on those days when he doesn't get picked. Guess which one I'd choose every time? I'd choose you forever and always. So just kind of a really cool book. Oh, and then I didn't get quite to the end of it. And I'd choose you too, said Father Elephant, who had just come in at the door. Daddy, Norbert yelled as he ran to hug his father. Son, God chose you too, on your worst days and your best days. God's love always shines on you, and it looks like one more person would choose you too, Dad chuckled. Really? Who? Asked Norbert. Sweet little Heidi the hippo is outside with ice cream, and she's waiting for you. So, just a cool little story. It's always good to have those stories that we can read to our grandkids or our great-grandkids. We always had videos that we would show our kids when they were little. Max Lucado's got a great children's books too. Some of you haven't seen those. Wonderful children's books like You're Special and You're Mine. So if you guys are looking for good children's books, this one, I Choose You by John Trent, or Max Lucado's books are tremendous. They even actually have, Max Lucado's are on video as well. So just lots of good videos that you might want to use with your kids. So again, I'm glad that you guys are here tonight. This is the third out of 4 sessions of the blessing. And throughout the last couple of weeks, we've talked about the elements that are important as we use the blessing in our families. So we've talked about meaningful touch, a spoken message that attaches high value. And tonight, we're going to, if it's going to let me go forward, we might just need to click that slide again. There it is. Perfect. Tonight we're going to talk about picturing a special future and an active commitment or a genuine commitment, okay? So on your books, this would be page 10. So this is a verse that probably many of you have heard many times in your life. When we think about God having a special plan for us or a future, this is the verse that we often will talk about, and it comes from Jeremiah 29, verse 11, and it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Now, the primary application of this scripture isn't actually for the blessing class that I'm teaching, okay? So I don't want you to think, well, this verse was written specifically for like our children or our grandchildren. This book was actually written to the Jews who were in exile in Babylon. So the Babylonians had come into Israel and they had attacked the Israelites because they had sinned and they had walked away from God. And so they went in and they took all these Israelites back to Babylon. And so they're in exile and they're away from their homeland and they're in a very, very hard, difficult place. And while in exile and while they were there, that's when God says, you know what? Even though it looks difficult right now, and even though you're not where you want to be, I know the plans I have for you, and they're plans to prosper you and not to harm you, and plans to give you a hope and a future. God was reminded them of the covenant that he had made years and years ago, right? The Abrahamic covenant where he was going to make them a great nation. He was reminding them of that, and he said, even though it looks like things are not where they need to be, it looks like everything is falling apart, I want you to understand I still have a future for you. I still have a hope for you, and I still have a plan for you. And I believe that some people are unable to see God using them in any special way. Some of you have maybe felt this way in your life where you've come to someone's life and you want them to know something that you see in them and they just aren't going to receive it. They don't receive it. Or someone comes to you and they says, God has a great purpose for you. God has a plan for you and you're unable to see it. And so we have to learn to let the people in our lives know that they have a hope and a future. But here's the reality. We live in a dark world, don't we? We live in a very dark world, and this picture of a campfire just reminds me of the difference that just a little bit of light can make in a dark place. And your kids and your grandkids and all of us are in a world that is very, very difficult right now. I grew up in the primarily 1980s and 90s, and we saw some things back then, right, that we were a little concerned about. But we're seeing so many more things right now that our kids are having to grow up in, and it can feel hopeless sometimes. In fact, some of us are wondering how our kids are going to survive this world that they live in. But the reality is that all of you and all of us can be that little bit of light, right? The light of Christ shining through us can bring hope into a dark place and into a dark world. So we don't want to give up on anyone. We want to continue to speak life into people and help them know So in your book, you'll see, are there things that I can speak to? And you can put any name here. Are there things that I can speak to my husband? Are there things that I can speak to my child? Are there things that I can speak to my daughter? Anyone in your life that will help them over a hurdle so that they can pursue their special future. Because I believe that insecurity hits all of us at times. Has everyone in here dealt with insecurity at some point in your life where you just felt like, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to accomplish this? I'm not sure I want to try out for that sport. I remember my daughter, oldest daughter, who struggles a little bit with not wanting to fail, just like her dad. That's probably my greatest fear, is that I will fail at something. And so sometimes there's two different options you can take when you're afraid to fail, right? One is you just don't try it, because if you don't try it, you're not going to fail at it, right? So that's one thing that you can do. The other is that you might want to push through it and prove that you can do it to everyone else around you. But insecurity is going to hit us at times, and we might lose initiative, we might lose purpose, and then we can settle. And what happens is God has these great plans for us, these things that he wants us to accomplish, and because we're afraid to fail or fall short, we just don't move forward in that calling. And so we have to get past the insecurities, and we have to encourage the people in our lives. All of us have people in our lives that need to be spurred on, to be encouraged to move ahead, to tell them that they can do it, that you're going to be with them all the way. Those are the sorts of things that help to overcome insecurity. Again, my oldest daughter, she played sports when she was younger, but always kind of wondered if she would ever be good enough to play at the high school level. And so we had debated a couple different schools to maybe send her to. And, you got the big schools like Carroll and Leo and Homestead and those schools, which there's thousands of kids. And so it's kind of sometimes difficult in those settings to make a team when there's that many that you're going against. She really wanted to play, but she kind of knew if she went to those schools, she wasn't going to be able to do it. So we prayed about it, thought about it a lot, and thought maybe it would be good for us to put her in a smaller school. So we thought about Lakewood Park Christian. We just thought it's a smaller school environment. There's not as many kids. Maybe, just maybe, she would be able to make the team. And that would be one of the coolest things that could ever happen to her, because confidence had always been a struggle for her. So we decided to let her try, and she goes out, and I remember the day she went out the first time, and she was so nervous and so scared, probably thinking she was completely going to fail. And the first time she went out there, these girls were so gracious to her and kind to her, and the coach who was coaching that year was just amazing at encouraging and making her feel important, and he put her in positions of the field that were very important positions on the field. And through playing soccer at Lakewood Park, she developed confidence that she had never had up to that point. It was so cool to see. And she's the daughter that's graduating from Grace this year and is going to start a doctoral program this fall. And just a teacher and a coach that said, I believe in you and you can do this, it changed everything for her. And so I look back on that and I'm like, I'm grateful for people who see things in us that sometimes we don't see in ourselves. And that's what all of you guys can be for the people in your lives. I don't care who it is, whether it's your husband, your wife, your kid, your grandkid. It helps to overcome security when we do that. So there are some ways in here that I believe that we can give hope in a future, but there's also some things that we can, and I'm going to give you some examples. Here's some things that you could say to people in your life that I think would spur them on to believe they could do it, right? These are some positive things that we might say. God has given you such a sensitive heart. I wouldn't be surprised if you end up helping many people when you get older, okay? That's a really great thing to say to a kid that you see is sensitive, they're tender. You know what? You're going to help a lot of people when you get older. And maybe even now you'll help many people because of your sensitive heart. Or you're such a good helper. When you grow up and marry someday, you're going to be such a help to your wife or your husband and their family. Like I just see, you're a helper, you are a servant, and everything you do is going to be beneficial to those you come into contact with. Those are the kind of things that are going to make someone believe in themselves and the special future. You can do anything you set your mind to. You know, how many people have had someone tell them that in their life? You know, I believe you can do anything you set your mind to, because if you want something, you know, you're stubborn. And we look at stubborn as a bad way, but if you use that stubbornness for God's purposes, you can do anything you set your mind to, and nobody's going to be able to stop you. You're going to be a great, I don't even fill in the blank, you're going to be a great coach, you're going to be a great teacher, you're going to be a great mother, you're going to be a great doctor, you're going to be a great pastor, you're going to, whatever that might be, you see something in them and you call that out of them. Or even this, I know you're scared, I know you're afraid, but you can do it. I believe in you. Those are the sorts of things that give encouragement, help people to believe there is a future for me. But some of us in here have had other things said to us that maybe were much like this. You better hope you can find someone to take care of you when you're older. I mean, what's that saying? What's that saying to a kid or anybody? What is that telling them when you say that comment? You're a failure? Okay. You're a failure. You're irresponsible. You can't do anything for yourself. And here's the truth. Sometimes we look at our kids and we have that thought, right? I mean, we do have those thoughts, maybe not this terminology, but I wish they would show some motivation. I wish they would actually try in the classroom, right? We can have those thoughts and we can find ways to spur them on, but you better hope you find someone to take care of you when you're older is not probably the phrase to use. Or you're so irresponsible you'll never be able to do anything for yourself. All right? Again, we may say that when we're frustrated, but not the best line to help someone think they've got a future. Unless you learn to sit and listen in class, you will never accomplish anything. I mean, I know someone in this church, and I'm not going to mention names, but this person was actually told on numerous occasions by their teacher that they were never going to amount to anything because all they ever did in the classroom was fool around, always. They were always fooling around with things and doing things other than paying attention, and so the teacher specifically told that student, you know, you're not going to amount to anything. You don't listen. And what this person's thought was, I'm smarter than you. I don't know that he thought that at the time, but this person now it has invented many things. School was not the perfect environment for him. He was a dreamer. And so he's accomplished an awful lot. And he actually told me, he's like, you know what? I've spent my whole life trying to prove that teacher wrong. That I was, I mean, and he has. And it's amazing. And some of you, that's you too. But not something we want to tell someone. Or nobody's going to want to marry someone like you. Or that's too hard. Better go for something you know you can handle. Don't we do that? That's too difficult for you. And sometimes we might even do it to protect our kids. Like, oh, I don't want to see you fail, so maybe try something a little easier. None of those things are things that are going to encourage the loved ones that we have to go after something and to believe in themselves. So want to go with those first phrases over those second phrases, okay? We want to help others see a future. So, and I want to add this to your phrase. I didn't put it in here, but help others see a future. Don't prescribe their future. Okay? Help others to see a future, but don't prescribe their future. Don't we sometimes as parents want to do that? Like we want certain things for our kids. We want them to be a great athlete, an NFL football player, a great musician. And so rather than helping them to see a future and getting to learn them and know them, we already have a mindset when they're born of what the end game will be. That's not a helpful thing to do to prescribe the future for your child. You just want to help them see a future. And Isaac did this with Jacob, didn't he? Isaac did that with Jacob when he spoke to him and the future that he had for him. And then Jacob did that. Last week we learned about that. Jacob did that for each of his sons. But I want to take you to a passage right in the middle of that in Deuteronomy chapter 28. And if you want to turn there, you can turn there. Did I say Deuteronomy? I mean Genesis. Okay, Genesis. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
So it was like, I'm sure he was trying to be encouraging to my brother, but on the flip side of that,
Yeah.
it was like telling me I didn't have,
So just be careful not doing that in front of the other kids. Yeah. And I think that's a good point. Yep. Good. All right. So I am Genesis 48. That's where I want to be. Genesis chapter 48. All right, so this is after Jacob's son Joseph had grown up, right? And Joseph had a bunch of brothers, and we all know that Joseph's brothers were all jealous of him. And so they decided that they were going to try to get rid of Joseph. And so they threw him into the pit, right? And they thought they had him dead. And Joseph ends up getting out. And Joseph gets into Egypt. And he goes into Potiphar's house. And Potiphar gives him all this. He gives him basically everything in his household, says you can have everything you want. And Potiphar's wife, right, she decides she wants Joseph. So she tries to seduce Joseph. And Joseph gets put in a bad place and gets in trouble. And then he basically interprets dreams, and he keeps everything that Joseph does, he does with integrity, and he keeps moving up further and further and further until he's in Pharaoh's household. And then the cool thing is he gets to that place where he's in Pharaoh's household, and then his dad and his family are all struggling. They're struggling with famine, and Joseph's family doesn't even realize that he's alive. And Joseph is able to actually go back and spend some time with his father. And in Genesis chapter 48, it says in verse 8 of 48 that when Israel saw Joseph's sons, and Israel is Jacob. So when Jacob saw Joseph's sons, he said, "Who are these?" And Joseph said to his father, "They are the sons that God has given me." And so Jacob said, "Bring them to me, and I will bless them." And his eyesight was poor because of old age, and he could hardly see. And Joseph brought them to him, and he kissed and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, "I never expected to see your face again, but now God has even let me see your offspring." And then Joseph took them from his father's knee, and he bowed with his face to the ground. And in verse 15, then he blessed Joseph and said, "The God whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who's been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who's redeemed me from all harm, may he bless these boys. And may they be called by my name and the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they grow to be numerous in the land." And so this is just a story of how it's just passed down, the blessing, right? I mean, Isaac passes this blessing on to Jacob. Jacob passes this blessing on to his children. He passes the blessing on to his children's children, so his grandchildren. And that's what we want to be doing. We want to help our kids and our grandkids see a future. Tell them that we know they can do it. Talk to them about their hopes. Talk to them about their dreams. In Genesis 27, we go all the way back to where Jacob did it. May God give to you from the dew of the sky and from the richness of the land. May he give you an abundance of grain and new wine. May people serve you and nations bow down and worship to you. May you be master over your relatives, and may your mother's sons bow and worship to you. Those who curse you will be cursed, and those who bless you will be blessed. So that's in Genesis 27. And then we read Genesis 48, right, when he blesses his grandchildren. And then in Genesis 49, Jacob is blessing his son, "Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the necks of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you." He's giving them a future. He's giving them a picture of all that God has in store for them. And he's doing it over and over and over again. So these are just wonderful examples of how we can help others to see a future. Even Jesus in John 14, he gives us a future, doesn't he? "In my Father's house are many rooms. If not, I would have told you. I'm going away to prepare a place for you. And if I go away and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, that you may be, that where I am, you may be also." I mean, and that's a picture of a wonderful future, not just the future we have in this life, but the future that we have in the next life with our Lord and with our Savior. It's this idea of helping people to see that they can be something even more than what they could imagine. So you guys all know what this is? This is a caterpillar. Now, this is a really cool-looking caterpillar, right? So some caterpillars we'd look at crawling along the ground, and we might say, that's not really how many of you guys think caterpillars are the coolest-looking animals, the prettiest animals that God created? I mean, maybe not. Maybe not. This one actually looks really kind of cool and amazing. But we all know that a caterpillar, a caterpillar was created by God. So caterpillars have purpose, and they're beautiful because they were created by God. So let's call that for what it is. But sometimes we have to let people know that, God has a future for you, and it might look very different than what you see right now. So this is the beautiful picture of something that happens called metamorphosis. And it's when a caterpillar turns into a beautiful butterfly, and then these butterflies fly around this time of year, and most of us would say butterflies are very, very beautiful. But they have to go through this change. They go through this metamorphosis. Some of us need to have our kids do a metamorphosis. Like they need to change their thinking, or our husbands or our spouses. They need to see themselves in ways that are different than how they currently see themselves, right? Sometimes we look at ourselves and we don't see a lot in us, but we want them to see themselves the way that God sees us, like this beautiful butterfly. And in order to do that, how do they do that? Don't be conformed to this age, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may discern what is the good, pleasing, and perfect will of God. So I believe one of the best ways to help our kids or loved ones to see a future is to help them think differently than they think before. So the world is going to tell them certain things that are true, they're going to tell them what the world wants to tell them. They need to understand what God has to say to them. So the best way to transform your mind is to encourage your kids to see themselves the way that God sees them. Do you know one of the best scriptures in the Bible? If you want to, your kids are like, you know what? Nobody loves me. Nobody cares about me. I don't see anything good of myself. I don't even think God knows me. I don't even think God cares about me. Some of us may have felt those things. Well, we go to Psalm 139, and it says things like this: where can I escape your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you're there. If I live in the eastern horizon or settle at the western limits, even there your hand will lead me. Your right hand will hold on to me. And it says in verse 13, it was you who created my inmost parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I will praise you because I've been remarkably and wondrously made. Your works are wondrous, and I know this very well. My bones were not hidden from you when I was made in secret and when I was formed in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw me when I was formless, and all my days were written in your book and planned before a single one of them came to be. God, how precious your thoughts are to me, how vast their sum is. If I were to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. And when I wake up, you're still with me. I mean, what a beautiful picture of what God did. He made you. He created you. He knit you. He put you together. He numbers the hairs on your head. He knows everything about you. He has a plan for you, a purpose for you, a calling for you. We need to be reciting these things to ourselves first, and then to those that we care about. So that's the first thing. How do you give a hope in the future? Help them to see the future that God has for them. It's been often said that water cannot rise above its source, all right? So now we all know that those fountains that they create that got all those jets that will pump it up, right? Water fountains, well, the water will, but naturally, water is not going to rise above its source. And sometimes our kids are not able to rise above what's been said to them or said about them. And some of you, it's the same way. You remember things that were said to you 15, 20 years ago that are still hurting you today, that you still remember today. And we just want to encourage you through this class that with the help of God, we can overcome those things and we can be a blessing to the people in our lives. There's a book written called Raising Dream Chasers. And in this book, what they talk about is some things that we can help, because we all want our kids to dream, right? I hope that you, at some point in your life, have encouraged your kids for them to dream, right? To think through things on their own and to figure out what may God be calling them to. And sometimes our kids will tell us dreams, and in our mind, we're like, not so sure, right? Like when they said they want to be a professional baseball player when they're 4 or 5 years old. I think there does come a day where we talk to our kids and say, you know, I know this has been where you want to, where you see yourself heading. It doesn't look like we're going that direction. You know, maybe we can kind of talk about some other areas. But when they're little, I think it's just let them dream, encourage them to dream, support them in it. But more than anything, tell them about these things. Teach them about perseverance. I mean, we need to teach our kids and other people how they can persevere through difficult times, right? That's one of the best things that you can do when you're raising a dream chaser is to persevere. James says, consider it pure joy when you face trials, because you know the testing of your faith develops perseverance. And perseverance must finish its work so that you become mature and complete, not lacking anything. Teach your children resilience. If you fall, get back up. If you fall again, get back up. You know, be resilient. Don't give up if you fall short. Continue to be resilient. Continue to fight. Learn responsibility. That's a great thing to teach, responsibility, that there are certain things that we need to understand. We need to be responsible for things, and our kids need to know about responsibility. Teach them how to set goals. We do this a lot when I'm meeting with couples. I'll say, hey, what are your goals for the first 3 years of your marriage, for the first 5 years of your marriage? I had a teacher in high school that wanted me to set a 10-year plan of goals. I'm never really a big fan of that because that's just like, just let me do 1 year, let me do a couple years. But it's good for us. It's good to do a couple, to have some goals that your kids can help accomplish. Teach them to set goals and teach them to be a team player. I mean, this world is not much team player kind of stuff. It's everybody for themselves. Teach your kids how to be team players. These are just some significant little things that I want reflected in my home. Like when my kids get out of the house, I would love for them to say, your child is a child who's persevered and is resilient and is responsible and is good at setting goals and is a team player. These are some good things to develop in our children. So more than just the dream they accomplish, if they're learning these things, that's what God's really concerned about. So just kind of a side thing on the raising dream chasers. Okay, the second one. We want to create a culture of blessing. You want to create a culture of blessing in your home, which means you want to live this out in your life daily, okay? Culture can be contagious. You can create the culture that you want by just setting the standards right from the beginning. Learning to create a culture. Culture is really important. So anybody like sports? Anybody? I love sports, and I don't get to talk a lot about sports in here, so I'm going to just for a few minutes. All right, so the team that I root for is a team that some of you are familiar with in football. They, basically since I've been born, they've been terrible, okay? So it's the Detroit Lions. Anybody know the Detroit Lions? Yeah, they're kind of the laughing stock of the NFL, okay? So over the years that I've watched the Lions, one of the things that I notice is that the culture of the Lions has always been, for as long as I can remember, a culture of loyalty, which loyalty can be a good thing. But they're loyal to whoever they put in charge of the program. They're going to keep them sometimes way longer. Like it's not working, but we're loyal to them, so they'll keep them. And that was like a culture that was important to them. And in some ways, like Ford Motor Company owns it. So in some ways, their Ford Motor Company that's a good thing for their company, to be loyal to their people. But sometimes on the football field, it's caused problems because they'll have guys that are well past their prime, and they just build, and it just doesn't work. So this last year, they decided to hire another coach, and it's like they've had so many coaches and so many GMs, but they hired a GM and they hired a coach, and when these guys came in, they said, we need to create a culture. We need to change the culture around here. The culture is not what we want it to be. So we want guys who are aggressive. We want guys who love football, where football is their life. We want guys that are versatile and that'll just run through people and are going to work and work and work and work. And so I don't know if it's going to work because nothing has ever worked, but it's pretty cool because when the draft happened this weekend, they were drafting players that fit the culture of what they wanted. And some of us need to create the culture that we want to see. And this works in your family too. Like, what do you want the culture of your home to look like? And sometimes you're going to need to create the culture that you want to create. You need to live out your values. You're going to have family values. What are your family values? I mean, help me with this. Would any of you guys say, here's one thing that's always been a family value in our home? Like when I think of our family, I would like this to be a value in our home. Does anybody have anything that you would say, I want this to be the culture of our home? We've been very diligent about this. Serving others, okay? We want our family to serve other people. We want to set that culture. And so if we want our kids to do it, then we actually have to do it, right? So a culture of serving. Same thing. You want to have a culture of serving people, serving other people, okay? What? That's a good one. I want my kids to have a good work ethic. I want them to work hard and understand that not everything is given to you in life. And it doesn't make our kids happy sometimes, does it? Were your kids always happy that work ethic was a value in your home? That they had to go to work when everybody else didn't?
No, they still tell me about that, but they're happy about it.
They're happy about it, okay, good. So work ethic, servant culture. Anything else that you guys would say, this is a value, this is a culture we're trying to create in our home? To be kind to everyone you come into contact with, to just be kind, okay? Treat people like you would like to be treated. Yeah. Okay, the culture that the dinner table is important. Yeah, there's not a lot of times where we get that time together to just talk about things that are important. So in our family, the dinner table and the culture of the dinner table is important. Awesome.
Faith focused.
What's that?
Faith focused.
Focused on faith. Like faith is going to be a priority. Yeah, so we might have, sports and work and all these other things, but faith is going to be the centerpiece of our home. And I just want you all to understand that. Faith is the core foundation of our family. That's good. Anybody else? Yeah. Okay, that's good. We talked about that earlier. Not letting fear dictate whether you try something or not. So don't let fear be the thing that stops you. Because we believe in you. We believe you can do this. And you know what? I've learned that if you fail, it's actually okay. Did you guys know that? It is okay to fail. Like, I don't know where we go thinking that you can't, like that's illegal or it's impossible to fail. It is actually an okay thing to fail. Failure actually sometimes leads to some really, really cool things in life. We're not all going to be Michael Jordan, okay? But Michael Jordan failed. He got cut from his high school basketball team. It's impossible to imagine that could happen. The greatest ball player of all time, he got cut, okay? Failure doesn't have to define you, right? I mean, we can grow through failure and we can accomplish things through failure. It's a worse thing it's my teacher in fourth grade, she said, it's better to try and fail than fail to try. And I've remembered it my whole life. And sometimes I still don't want to try because I don't want to fail, but she's right. It's better to try and fail than fail to try. Guys, these are just culture things. You can create a culture in your home. It's exciting. Will your kids always follow the culture of the home? No. Will they like it all the time? No. But these are things that are of value to you, and you can create a culture of blessing. In the same way, just like work ethic and servant heart and kindness, create a culture of blessing. Proverbs 15 says that bright eyes gladden the heart, and good news puts fat on the bones. So what's that? Yeah, too much good news. That's good, but it does. I mean, just looking at someone in the eye, doesn't it make a big difference when someone looks you in the eye and they tell you something that about who you are? There's some times where I'll sit down with people and I'll have a conversation with them and they're doing this the entire time. They're talking to me about all these things that are going on and I'm like, will you look me in the eye? Like there's something about looking someone in the eye and telling them what you see in them. I think make eye contact is really, really, really important, and I would challenge all of us to do that. Don't overlook the importance of that. Do you think when Jesus, I've got a couple pictures up here, because Jesus, obviously, he's a perfect example of creating a culture of blessing. We see pictures of Jesus, and it seems like, and I think this is how it would have been. It's what you really notice is just how he's looking everyone directly in the eye, okay? He just always is doing it. Every picture shows that, and I think that's who Jesus was. He saw value in every person. Don't you love the stories of the woman at the well? The stories of Jesus seeing something that those people didn't see in of themselves. This woman who'd been married 6 times, and Jesus knew that about her. She's out there in the middle of the day, in the heat of the day, because no one wanted to be around her, and Jesus comes up to her and says, I see something in you that nobody else sees. I believe in you. I have a future for you. What a cool deal that would have been for this woman to understand and to see the Messiah look at her in that way and to see value in her and to see purpose in her. I love these pictures of Christ and what he does because he always makes people feel valuable. Or this picture of, these fishermen that were tending to their fish nets, and he comes up to them and he says, I see something in you. And let me tell you this about fishermen, because this might not be something you would know, but back in the time of Christ, most Jewish young men would have wanted to be rabbis. That's what most Jewish young men wanted to be. They wanted to be a rabbi. And so there was this saying that was back in the time of that may you be covered in the dust of your rabbi. That was the kind of the end game. That was what people wanted to be about. Well, a lot of these fishermen may have gone to rabbinical school and they may have learned a lot of scriptures and things, but maybe some of them didn't make the cut. They didn't accomplish their dream of what they wanted to accomplish. They didn't become rabbis. And so they're out tending to their flocks, catching fish. That had become their career. And Jesus comes up to them, the master rabbi, and says, you know what? I see a purpose for you. Like you may have failed at this, or someone may have said you're not good enough, but you know what? I want you to follow me. You're one of my 12. You're one of my main men. You know, I see something in you that no one else sees. Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. What a cool thing that would have been for those men who probably felt like a failure, that Christ made them feel important. Or even Zacchaeus in the tree, right? The chief tax collector who had ripped off 1 million people of a lot of different money. But there was something about Jesus that drew him to him, and Jesus actually goes and finds him in a tree and witnesses to him, and Zacchaeus is like, you know what, I'm going to pay everybody back all I did. I had an encounter with Jesus, and he sees something in me that I don't see in myself, and I believe that I can be more than what I've always been, and I'm going to be an example to people. I mean, Zacchaeus, the tax collector, you don't need to be known as the tax collector anymore. Zacchaeus was changed. You know, we don't need to call Rahab the prostitute anymore, okay? God saw something in Rahab, and he used her to help rescue his people. God is a master of taking people who don't believe, they don't see anything in of themselves, but he saw something in them, and he believes they could be more than they ever dream. I had an elder of a church many years ago that if you want to sometimes see the full picture of the church, you become an elder, but sometimes you see some more things that you don't want to see. And so this guy became an elder. I don't think he ever, he knew that God was calling him to it, but he never knew what he would encounter till he encountered it. And he started to see people for who they really were and all the complaints and all these kind of things. And I remember him coming to me one time, and he's like, how do you look at people and not just like go off on them? Like he just couldn't understand. He's like, how can you be gracious with all these people? Because they're very, very annoying is what he was trying to say. And I just said, you know what? Sometimes I just have to try to see people the way that God sees them. And sometimes those people are just broken, hurting people. And I don't want to hold those things against them. And I want to believe that these people can be something different than they've always been. I think that's what Christ taught us. That's what Christ showed us. So God, I want you sometimes just to give me your eyes for just 1 second. Give me your eyes so I can see. Everything that I keep missing, give me your love for humanity. Give me your arms for the brokenhearted, the ones that are far beyond my reach. Give me your heart for the ones forgotten. Give me your eyes so I can see. Great song by Brandon Heath. And this is, I think, the reality of how all of us need to live our lives. God, for just 1 second, give me your eyes. Give me the eyes that you had when you looked at that woman at the well, when you looked at Zacchaeus, when you looked at Rahab, when you looked at Saul, who would become Paul, the greatest missionary of all time, when you looked at those fishermen who didn't make the cut and you made them your followers. God, give me those eyes. Give me those eyes for my husband, for my wife, for my child, for my grandchild, for my friends at work. I don't care who it will be. Learn to see people the way that God sees people. I love in that chapter 48 that I read earlier, Genesis chapter 48, there's a phrase that says, may God cause you, well, Ephraim and Manasseh, these were Joseph's sons. Well, Manasseh's name, just a side note, Manasseh's name meant forgetful. Okay, that was his name. The name Ephraim meant fruitful. And so in the blessing that was given to them, understanding their name, basically what Jacob was saying to them when he blessed them is, may God cause you to forget the pain of your past and all that you had been through, and may he make you fruitful, and may he make you prosperous in your future. I think even the names that were given to those boys were regarded of that. May God forget your past, forget the pain of your past, and may he prosper you, and may he make you fruitful in the future. You see, God sees things different than we do, and we need to learn to see people the way that God sees people. I believe that strongly. Easier said than done, okay? But that's what our prayer needs to be. All right. The third thing that we need to do in order to give people a hope or to see a hope in the future is to model Christ. Model Christ. Model life in him, and don't step away from people. Add blessing to those he places in our life story. Don't subtract from them and dam up the stream, okay? We want to model life in Christ. We want our kids to see that Christ makes a difference. Christ makes a difference for us, and the way that I live my life needs to be the way that Christ lived his life. And that was He believed the best in people. He never gave up on people. He forgave people. I mean, even when he's up on the cross, and he's hanging there on the cross, and he's looking down at the people who are mocking him and making fun of him and throwing the stuff in his wounds that would have burned so bad. These people that were just being hateful and spiteful to him, he just looks at them and he says what? Father, forgive them. They don't understand what they do. And I think there's a lot of people in our lives that have hurt us and they've harmed us. And sometimes they understand what they do. We recognize that. But the reality is that hurt people hurt people. And some people have just been through so much pain and so much hurt, and they just need somebody to show them something different than what they've always known. And the way we do that is by modeling life at Christ and proving to those people God has a purpose for you, He has a plan for you, He has a calling for you, and continue to speak that into people is part of just giving them a special future, okay? And then, so Ephesians 5. Ephesians 5 says this, follow God's example in everything you do, because you are His dear children. Live a life full of love for others, following the example of Christ who loved you and gave Himself as a sacrifice to take away your sins. That's the example. Follow God's example in everything you do. Your example is Christ. You just need to reflect Christ to people. You don't have to try too hard. You just need to connect to Christ. Point your kids towards Christ. In parenting, you know the best way that you can parent your children is just to shepherd their heart and to point them towards Christ. You don't have to make them perfect, fix them. Just point them to Jesus. You don't have to have a million rules. Just point them to Jesus. When they're directed to Jesus and they fall in love with Jesus, some of the rules fall into place. Just follow Christ. Follow His example. I love what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 11. Now, we can look at this and say, well, Paul wants people just to imitate him and not Christ. It's not what he's saying there. He basically, what he's saying is, follow me as I follow Christ. I want to set an example of what Christ, for me to die is Christ, to die is gain, right? To live is Christ, to die is gain. I mean, Christ set an example of the life we're called to live with Christ, and He just says, be imitators of me as I am of Christ. Don't follow me if I don't follow Christ, but as I follow Christ, follow me. It's the idea of, even in marriage, I mean, we're easier to follow when we reflect Christ. Some men are very hard to follow if they're not going to reflect Christ. Submission is hard when it's selfish. We need to follow Christ. We need to reflect Him, and good things will happen, okay? This is truth. I believe John MacArthur said this, that sometimes you're the only Bible some unbelievers will ever read. So not only do we need to bless the people who are close to us and make them see Christ and understand Christ for who He is, I mean, our kids are going to get an example of who Christ is by the way we raise them. Or they might look at it the other way. Unbelievers, it's the same way. When you interact with people, what are they reading? What are they seeing? Doesn't it say in the gospel, or in the Bible that we're living epistles, right? We're living epistles. We're letters written by God and read by men. So we want to be a good living epistle. We want to be a good example. So model life in Christ. All right, the final aspect of the blessing. So we've gone through the 4: meaningful touch, spoken message, attaching high value, seeing a special future. Now, this fifth one is an active commitment. In your book, it's genuine commitment. It's actually an active commitment. And this is really the foundation of all of them. This isn't something we specifically do on occasion, like give someone meaningful touch, or this is just a life that we live. So this is kind of encompasses all of those 4 things, that we need to have an active commitment to the people in our lives. We need to believe in our kids and show that we're committed to them each and every day. And you know how we show someone we're committed? It's not by what we say primarily, it's what we do. I think a lot of times it's like, well, I told you I love you. Like, you don't believe it? It doesn't feel like you love me. Some people, it's like they'll throw out the I love you card. I told you I love you. Why don't you? Well, because you're not showing it. You're saying it. You're saying the right things, but I don't feel that. I don't feel loved by you. In James 2, it says, if a brother or sister is without clothes and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, stay warm and be well fed, but you don't give them what the body needs, what good is it? I mean, what good is it if you give blessings, say nice things to people? I hope you're at peace. I hope you're warm. I hope you're well fed. See ya. Like, actions speak louder than words. They do. And so as you are showing blessing, if you say and don't do, it's dead. If you say and don't do, it's dead. It doesn't mean anything. And so I want us to understand a couple of things. One, our actions should not dictate our feelings. Our feelings should not dictate our actions. Our actions dictate feelings, not the reverse. Why is this true? Because you can control your actions, you can't control your feelings. You guys know this? You can control the actions and the things you do. I can't control all my feelings. I can't control all of my emotions. If I'm dictated by what I feel like I should do or what my emotions are telling me, I'll probably never do it. Sometimes I have to make a commitment to do things that I don't want to do, even if they're hard, just because God's called me to do it. And I'm going to believe that if I keep doing the same actions, if I keep loving my husband when he's unlovable, if I keep loving my wife when she's unlovable, if I keep loving my husband when he doesn't show me respect, or I keep respecting my husband when he's not loving me properly, if I will choose to take the stance and show love and be love and show respect and believe that it'll make a difference, you can only control what you can control. But your actions are going to need to dictate your feelings. And sometimes if you do it enough, you might actually find that it's beneficial. And you might find yourself falling in love. I don't know if I told you guys this story, but years ago, my brother, he's 2 years younger than me. When I was in college, he was a freshman in college. He came into my room one day and he was bawling, out of control. I'm like, what in the world is happening here? And he comes and he's like, I just want you to know, his girlfriend that he had in high school, they had broke up in college. They weren't together, but over Christmas break, he had gone home. It was the one time in his life that he had sex outside of marriage. It was a one-night kind of thing. She got pregnant. The only time that he had ever done that, she got pregnant. And he came into my room, and I remember him crying, and he had all the people that were telling him what he needed to do. You need to marry her because she's pregnant, so you need to get married as soon as possible. And there were other people that's not, you don't want to do that because you don't want to compound a mistake with something more and then find out it's not going to work. And so I just remember walking with my brother down that road, and he didn't marry her right away, but he decided he's going to take care of his son and do the child support, and that was a lot of money for a kid who was in college and didn't really have any money. And I remember him taking trips. He did an internship in college up in Wisconsin, and he would drive home every weekend from Wisconsin to visit his son and to help take care of him. But he didn't love his it was the mother of the child. But over time, he felt like God was telling him that the best thing for his son would be if he was able to marry his mother. So even though he didn't feel like that was what he wanted to do, he started praying to God that God would help him fall in love. He did. He started praying that prayer. And he prayed it for a while, and then over time, he decided he was going to actually ask her out on a date. And they went on a date, and then they went on a couple more dates. And then after a while, he wasn't just coming home to see his son. He was coming home to see her. And he ended up falling in love with her. Even though his feelings weren't there, he prayed to God, and he did the things he needed to do for that to happen. Ended up, they got married. They now have 5 kids. He has all boys. I have all girls. But he's in ministry, and he just started a mission in Haiti called Empowered International. He bought the land. He's running this ministry in Haiti. At that time, people looked at him and said, you just messed up your life. And I told him in that room one day, because I remember him telling me, he's like, and this is another cool part of the story. He came into my room, and he's like, Troy, I just want you to know that after Stacy got pregnant and before I knew, the Lord called me into ministry. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt he called me into ministry. He's like, I didn't know she was pregnant. God called me into ministry. I found out she was pregnant. Do I have to give that up? And I'm like, no, because your story is going to be a powerful story someday. And so just to see where they've come, and we're 24 years. I think he's probably 20 plus years with her right now. And he's a pastor in town here. Just a really cool story of, your feelings don't have to dictate your actions. Your actions can dictate your feelings. And I know all you want to be committed to people, but people hurt us and harm us. And we just need to be reminded it's okay to use your life to benefit others, even if you don't get much in return. You know who's great at doing this? Mothers. Like, I think that's the epitome of what a mother does, right? It's okay to use your life to benefit others even if you don't get much in return. Now, some moms would say, I get much in return, just my kid loves me, but there's a lot of effort that goes into some things we do, and when we don't get anything into return, we can feel like saying, forget it. Like, just forget it. I'm done with this parenting thing. I'm done with this marriage thing. It's not what I thought it would be, okay? Like, it can feel that way sometimes, but we have to understand that our actions don't dictate feelings. We need to be proactive. This is one of 7 habits of highly effective people. You guys familiar with Stephen Covey? He wrote a book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of the first things he says that's important for a highly effective person is to be proactive versus reactive, which means you operate by your values. You operate by predetermined things that you are going to be about. So when a situation gets tough and difficult and you feel like I'm going to react by lashing out or saying something stupid or doing this or doing that, we don't be reactive. We're proactive. We know what we believe, and we're going to live that out. So circumstances don't have to define us. When things go bad, it doesn't have to defeat me because I'm proactive. There's certain things that I feel called to and I'm about. So we need to be proactive people, not reactive people. And you're proactive when you know what your values are and what you want to live out, and you live it out consistently. But the second thing that I want us to remember is that commitment does cost sometimes. It does. I mean, has anybody felt at times like you have shown an unbelievable amount of love to your children and it just seems like they don't understand it or they'll never receive it? They continue to push you away and you just continue to be committed and you continue to pursue them and go after them and you just believe that that's a part of commitment. Going after them and continuing to pursue is just a part of what it is, and the reward is worth it. I'm going to continue to love. I'm going to continue to give the blessing. And I'm not even going to do it for anything I can get out of it. I'm just going to do it because it's what God called me to do. And like I told you, the moms who do this, I think there's a great passage in Proverbs 31. It talks about the noble woman or the noble wife. I love that passage, but it just says, who can find a wife of noble character? She's far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he'll not lack anything good. She rewards him with good, not evil, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax and works with willing hands. She's like the merchant ships, bringing her food from far away. She rises while it's still night and provides food for the household and portions for her female servants. She evaluates a field and buys it. She plants a vineyard with her earnings. She draws on her strength and reveals that her arms are strong. Her hands reach out to the poor, and she extends her hands to the needy. She's not afraid for her household when it snows. She makes her bed. Just all these things that a mother and a noble woman does time after time and after time. What's the reward? What's the reward? Sometimes you wonder, what am I doing this for? But I love at the end of this, in 27, she watches over the activities of her household and is never idle, and her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also praises her. Many women have done noble deeds, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord will be praised. Give her the reward of her labor, and let her praise work at the city gates. I love the idea of her children rise up and call her blessed. And some of you are probably waiting for that day to come where your children will rise up and actually just tell you thank you, that they actually appreciate something. For me, I did it when I was about 23 years old. Called my mom up on the phone. Said, Mom, I was a terrible child for much of my life. For real, I was a pain in the butt child. I was argumentative. I never appreciated my mother's rules. I would yell at her over and over and over again. I'm sure there's many days she didn't feel loved by me. I remember sitting outside her door feeling like my parents are going to get divorced, and the reason they're going to get divorced is because of me. I mean, seriously, I was not a good child. And this is a child who went to youth group and was like president of the youth group and was in Bible quizzing and did all these things and treated my mother terrible. And later in college, I started learning about ministry and learning about this Proverbs 31 passage, and I read it. I'm like, that was my mother. Like, that's what my mother did. And all these times, all I did was say these mean, evil, awful things and never appreciate anything and tell everyone about all these rules she created that were so bad for me. And in college, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, my mother, everything she did was because she loved me and not to ever get anything in return, and I just never even told her thank you. And I need to do that, so called her up on the phone, and I just said, Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all of those years of the ways that I treated you. You didn't deserve that. You deserve better than that. And I'm trying to spend a lot of my life now reminding my mom of the value that she has and all the things that she's done for me and how grateful I am for who she was. I mean, when I talk about all of these stories, I look at my life and I'm like, I'm grateful. My dad passed away 10 years ago today, and we have a little thing going on in our chat. My sister's like, we just need to say some funny things or favorite memories of Dad, and that's been going on today. But I'm so grateful, again, that my parents, even though they didn't grow up with the blessing, they passed it on. So I'm going to close tonight by just giving you a couple of thoughts. And this is beyond the commitment costs and what we've talked about. I want to challenge you with something, and I'm sorry it's not in your manual. You can write this down. But I wanted to think of some things that I think that we can do. Specifically, this is going to be in regards to everybody in your life. One of the best things you can do if you really want people to feel blessed and you want to honor people and value people, one of the best things you can do is to be a student of your child. Be a student of your spouse. Be a student of your coworker. Be a student of your friend. Be a student of your parent. We need to be a student of the people in our lives. We need to learn to understand them because, like you said earlier, all of kids are different. And if we're going to try to put all of our kids in one little box and say this is what's going to work for every child, you are going to massively fail. You all know that, right? If you try to parent one kid just like you parent another kid, it's going to totally backfire. Why? I love the passage that says, train up in the child and the way they should go, and in the end they won't depart from it. There's a version of that says, train up your child according to their bent. And I'm like, that is really good, okay? So our children are all bent in different ways. They're not the same. So we need to be a student of our kids. One of the things we do in our family, and you can do this with your family, these are a couple fun things to do. One is to do personality profiles with your kids. Some of them might be, oh, gee. And if they're like 3 or 4 years old, don't do it. But we did this about 6 months ago. With our girls are 21, 20, and 16. We took all this. It's called 16personalities.com. It's free online. It's really comprehensive. It's awesome. I'm an ESFJ. We got all kinds of different things, but we took it as a family, and I have it written down on my phone. I know what all my kids are, and I sometimes have to remind myself, okay, not all of my kids are E's. They're not all extroverts, okay? So when I get mad at them because they come home and they sit on their phones and stare at their phones for 2 hours and don't want to talk, that it's not because they don't love their father or they're bad kids. It's they're introverts. They need time to themselves, okay? Or when I get mad at them because they aren't dreaming and visioning about things and all they're worried about is the here and now, and they can't even think past today because today is too stressful in and of itself. They're an S. They're a strong S. They're structured routine. They live in the moment. They're not visionaries. They don't dream, okay? My wife is 98% not dreamer, okay? She doesn't want to think about 2 weeks from now. Today was hard enough for her to get through, okay? Guys, we need to understand our loved ones, our kids, and we need to parent them in a way that is according to their bent. This test is a great test if you want to do this with your kids, okay? Another thing, and this is in the back of your book, and this is one exercise that I would love for you to do. It's in the final page of your manual. I've got it written for like a him and a her, because I do this in premarital counseling all the time. So, again, this is free information, but a lot of times when we feel like we're doing a good job as a husband or a wife in loving our significant other because we give them lots of gifts or buy them lots of flowers or things like that, and we wonder why they're not responding, we have to understand that all of our love languages are different, and so we all give and receive love different. Okay, if I wanted to be meaningful touch is going to be the way that I primarily showed love to all 3 of my kids, Kylie is going to, after a few months, she's not going to like me as a father. She's not. She's not going to feel loved. Kylie, come here. Let me hold you. Let me hug you. Why aren't you hugging me? Come here. And she's like, oh, I don't really like to be touched. I don't, okay? So I got to figure out, what does Kylie need? What's her bent? I need to love her in a different way than I love my other kids, right? So, I have to understand that Kylie is a gifts person. She loves gifts, okay? My daughter Aubrey is a quality time person. My daughter Caitlin, like I told you last week, last week or a few weeks ago, she just came. I was laying in my bedroom on the floor watching TV. She's 20 years old. She came, sat down next to me, and put her head on my chest and just laid there. And I was like, because we don't, we have issues sometimes because it's hard parenting an adult child. And there's sometimes where you just kind of feel like, oh, this is so much harder than I thought it was going to be. Do they even love me anymore? Like sometimes you feel that way. And she came in there and just laid her head on my chest. And not just for like a second, but for 5 minutes. And I'm like, this is a little awkward and weird even, But then I'm like, no, it's not. Like, I'm going to take advantage of this kind of. We just need to know our kids. We need to understand our spouse. We need to understand our kids. We need to understand there's certain ways that people give and receive love. It's not all the same. But if you learn to do it and sacrifice, it'll be really, really helpful. And on that test, the bottom part of it, it's really important because when you fill this out, it's going to be the most natural way for you to show love. So let's just, for example, I'm going to give you an example. So I am an acts of service is my primary way to show love. That's just natural for me. I don't have to think about it. I just constantly am trying to do things to serve. That's just how I think, okay? So many, many times I'll on my day off, I'll go grocery shopping and I'll do laundry and I clean the whole house up and I'm trying to, and it's not that my wife doesn't, because she does appreciate those things, but there was a time where I'm like, it doesn't feel like she really even notices. Like I'm showing love to her really, really well and she's just not receiving it. It's her fault. And then I'm like, we did this love language thing and on her list, what acts of service is on her list? It's like 4th. So doesn't mean she doesn't want it, but it just means if I'm not giving her quality time, like if I'm just busy all the time and being at the church all the time and then going and leaving and doing this and working out and playing salt and I'm never around, she's not going to feel loved just because I do the laundry and I do and I unload the dishwasher, okay? Most times what I've recognized is where we're not good at, that's usually what our loved ones need. And I think God does that on purpose because he wants us to know if you're going to make this work, you're going to have to work at it. Okay? Commitment costs. Be a student of your child. Go through the 5 love languages with your spouse and your kids and the personality profiles. Learn these people. Learn them, okay? So that's the one thing. The second thing, enter into their world. And this could be spouse, parent, child. Enter into their world. My dad did this well. When we were texting today about the things I appreciated about my dad did not like sports. My dad could barely throw a ball or shoot a ball. It was pretty fun to do it with him, actually, because he was not good. He didn't have a sports in his body. I don't know where I got it from, but he didn't enjoy sports. He didn't really care about anything. But do you know, my dad, when I played sports, he never missed a game, ever. I don't even know if he even enjoyed the sports that he was watching, but he enjoyed being there for me. And quality time was what he did well. And so he entered into my world, even though he didn't even care about that. That really meant a lot to me that my dad would do this well. It was a great example to me now that I have 2 daughters who are in ballet, okay? Do I like ballet? No, I don't. It's not natural. I don't. But I have. They're in worship dance here. And they've been in it, and my daughter Kylie is teaching. And the other night, I came to the ballet performance like I do every single year. And my wife came the night before because there was some family there, and they were doing a Christmas thing, and I'm like, I can't do 2 Christmas things in 2 nights. So I stayed home, and then I came the next night, and 3 or 4 different occasions, I'm crying because I'm watching my daughter dance before the Lord and teach these kids, and she's running, trying to make it all work together, and it's just I don't care about ballet, but I care about her. And so I'm going to enter into their world. And sometimes all of us have to do that. It's not going to be our natural tendency to do that. But we have to enter into their world to let them know that we value them and to let them know that we're there. Because if you say and don't do, it's dead. So be a student of your child or spouse or parent, or it applies to everything. You see what I'm saying? Enter into their world. And the final thing, invite them into your world. Invite them into your world. So take daughter to work day. You know, those are always good things. Let your daughter see what you do, or your son see what you do. Take them to work. Let them enter into your world a little bit. And I know we can't always do that, but entering into their world and inviting them into your world are really important things. And I'm going to end with just a couple of stories. One of them in the book, The Blessing, John Trent talks about his mother. John didn't have a father, right? So part of the reason he wrote the book, The Blessing, is because his father was never a part of his life. So he never got the blessing from his father. Even to the day his father died, he never got the blessing. But he tells the story of his mother and the time that his mother invested in him and how his mother always tried to enter into their world. And so the book tells the story about this bookshelf that their mother bought. And the bookshelf had three different rows, okay? She had 3 boys. And on the first row of the bookshelf were books that were all theology and psychology books, okay? All of the theology and psychology books that she had read as a mother. Now, how many of you mothers, your first thought is, I want to read psychology and theology books? Does any of you have a shelf of that? No, her first shelf was all theology and psychology. Second shelf, all about cancer and genetics, like books about cancer and genetics and all that kind of environmental stuff, okay? Biology, like an entire shelf full. Any of you moms got the shelf full of the genetics books and the books about cancer and all those kind of things? And then on the top shelf was an entire shelf filled with heavy equipment, machinery sorts of things, like all of this different heavy machinery, heavy equipment. That was what the entire shelf was full of. And then he goes on to say the reason you know why his mother had those shelves, because she learned the bent of her children and she learned what they were going into and what they felt called to. So she started reading up on every one of their kids and what they were going into. So she started reading books on psychology and theology because John Trent became a psychologist, a Christian psychologist. So she wanted to learn about him. And then John's brother he operates heavy machinery. So she just bought all these books about all these different kinds of heavy machinery and read about it. And then she has a son who's a doctor. He's a cancer doctor. That's what he does. And so he just told the story of his mother, like, made an effort to enter into their world and learn about their world so that she could connect with them. I thought that's just a really cool story. Like that's when the blessing pays off, is when you're a student of your child and you enter into their world. And the final story is a story that's actually in the blessing book. And I'm going to close with it tonight. And it's a story about a guy named Bubs, okay? Bubs Russell was only 17 on that infamous Sunday morning in 1941 when Pearl Harbor was bombed. Later that day, he told his father and mother the shocking news of the Japanese attack. Not long afterwards, Bubs was called into the Army and ended up serving in the Army Air Corps, now called the Air Force. After special training in communications, he was assigned as a radio operator in a B-29 bomber. The youngest in his crew, Bubs had to grow up fast. In only a few months, he found himself stationed on the island of Saipan in the Western Pacific. From this tiny island, B-29s were making bomber runs on Japan. The work was dangerous, even deadly. On the morning of December 13th, 1944, 18 bombers soared out over the Pacific to make a bomb run on factories at Nagoya, Japan. 4 of the planes that left Saipan that morning never returned. Bubs' plane was among them. Official word that Bubs had been killed in action came to his parents from the War Department. They, like so many other family members in those days, received a telegram along with a small white flag, bordered with red and trimmed with blue and gold. The flag had one small gold star in the middle, the symbol of a son who had fallen in battle. However, Bubs' parents also received something else. Almost a month after his plane went down, a letter came in the mail. Bubs had placed it on his pillow before his last mission. Dear folks, I've left this with instructions to send it on to you if anything happens to me. I send you my love and blessings. My life has been a full one. I've been loved like very few persons ever. I love you with all the best that is in me. It hasn't been hard for me, knowing you believe in me, trust me, and stand behind me in fair or foul. Knowing this has made me strong. Would your children be able to write a letter like this to you? They could if they grew up in a home committed to being a source of blessing, homes like the one in which Bubs grew up. The words might be different, but the sentiment would be the same. Giving our children the blessing is like casting bread upon the waters. In years to come, they too will rise up and bless us. And just kind of a good example to me of just taking the effort that we're learning in this class to take the steps to do the things could change everything for someone in your life. And so next week is the final session of the class, and I would like to next week. I've already talked to a couple of you, and I know that some of you are taking what we're learning here very seriously, and you're actually implementing some things. I've heard from some of you, and I think it's really amazing. I want to give you an opportunity next week to just share, hey, here's some things that we have done or that we have tried, and I feel like it's been a step in the right direction. Some of you have talked to me about things you've done in your family in the past that has bore fruit, of just doing blessings in your family and how that's paid off. I'd love to give you guys an opportunity just to share next week a couple of those things. I know it's always weird and awkward to do that, but I want us to take this seriously. And on the questions to consider today, this week, you'll see two things. Have you experienced someone committing to help you achieve your special future? If so, how did they communicate their commitment to you? Is there someone in your life that you can help by making a commitment to help them? And this is your task for the week, and all of us should do this. All of us should do this in some way. This week, write some words of encouragement to a child, a spouse, or a friend that can give them hope as they move into their future, specifically picturing a special future for those people. Share the words you wrote with the person you wrote them for to experience how powerful this element of the blessing can be. So it's just the practical application to the things that we're learning, putting those things into practice and believing that those things will make a difference. And then come next week with stories of how you're trying to bless in your home. Some positive stories. I want to encourage one another with that because I do believe if we do these things, it will really make a difference in the peoples that we love in their lives, okay? And next week we're also going to close with, it's a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about, there are some barriers to blessing others, and some of that comes from our experiences that we've had growing up, and I've alluded to this some, but some of us come from very difficult home environments where we really have struggled to be able to do this well. So we're going to talk about some things that will actually be a barrier to the blessing and 7 effects that can happen when we miss the blessing. I just think it's important for us to understand those things. And then what do we do if we have missed the blessing? Just some practical things. If this is something that I've missed out on, I think there's some practical things we can do to be able to move forward so that it doesn't hold us back. We need to heal. We need to heal sometimes because hurt people, and if we continue to operate out of the pain of our past, it will continue to affect us in the future. It will affect our present, and it will affect the future. So we just want to talk about some of those things and maybe find some healing through those things next week, and that's how we'll close, okay? So one more week, and I would love to have you all back. As was before, if some of you have missed any of these, you can go to the Central Ministries app and on the app it says Other Ministries, and you can find Central Institute, and all of these classes will be on there. So you can kind of catch up on those if you've missed or you need to fill in the blanks. You can find those on that web page, okay? Or you can go to Central Institute's Facebook page, and they're on there as well. So just a couple options if you have missed them or can't be here one week. So I think the slides you can you see the slides on those?
I know for sure today we can.
Okay. Yeah, most of them, maybe not all of them, but most of the slides you should be able to see them. Like this class, you should be able to see what's on there. So yeah. Yep, you're welcome. All right, let me just say a prayer for all of you, and then we'll let you guys go. Our God and Father, we thank you once again for allowing us to be here today. Lord, I'm just so grateful for your faithfulness to us. I thank you, God, for seeing things in us that sometimes we don't see in ourselves. May we, if there's anybody in this room even now that's struggling to believe that they have a future, or they're struggling to see hope, they're struggling to see a situation that they wonder if ever is going to change, Lord, remind them of the miracle-working God that you are. Lord, if you raised dead people back to life, then you can raise a marriage back to life. You can raise a relationship with a child back to life. You can bring a prodigal home. God, you are a miracle-working God, and that's what you've always been. And may you just help us to just do our part to model life in you. Lord, that we would be examples of Christ, that we would speak the truth in love, that we would, everything we do, that we would be kind, that we would be considerate. Lord, that we would help our children and our loved ones to see things that they don't see in themselves. May we show them the special future that you have for them. May we speak words of encouragement and love, meaningful touch, attaching high value. Lord, we want to live these things out in our lives because we believe it makes a difference, and we believe we live in a world where this is needed more than ever. And so give us the ability to carry these things out and to put into practice what we're learning. Because information, if it doesn't lead to transformation, it doesn't really matter too much. And so may the information we're learning transform our hearts and transform our relationships. Remind us, God, that you're not calling us to change anyone else. You're just calling us to work on us. Help us all to be proactive and not reactive, to live out our values regardless of whether the people around us do the same thing in return. May our feelings not dictate our actions, but may our actions dictate our feelings. We love you, God. We thank you for tonight, and I pray a special blessing upon everyone as they travel. May you keep them safe, watch over them, and in everything we do and say this week, may we bring honor and glory to your name. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.